recap. This is not the recap. We're not talking about the recap. It's not the recap show. This is the live show. We're talking about prep time. It's time to do some prepping on our prep show. Hey, everybody. I'm Tom Lommel. I apologize for being an hour late today. My computer decided not to connect to the internet. That's a problem when your whole show is based around you streaming your deepest, most sincere gaming thoughts directly into the internet. So, I apologize for everybody having to wait an hour, but I got things ironed out. Here we are. Let's dive into what will be our final prep show of 2016. There will be, FYI, no Disorganized play next week. I leave on Wednesday to go back to my home state of Minnesota, and therefore I will not be running a game on Wednesday. That means there's no prep show on Wednesday. I'm also shooting a gig on Tuesday. So this is our last. This is our last prep show for the year. So exciting stuff. That's the news. So let us make the most of it, shall we? So today on our agenda, we're going to recap the recap from last Thursday. We're going to talk about some resources for the road, and what I mean by that is Chapter 3 is largely a travel chapter. Let's go visit here, let's go visit there, etc., etc., etc. I've touched on some of these things before, but I want to kind of circle back around a little bit and talk about your resources for helping you design this travel-heavy portion of the adventure. I want to come back to some not-so-random encounters. So we talked on Thursday about kind of priming the well with essentially deciding the random encounters in advance. So I want to talk some more about that. And then the next segment that will be coming up on Wednesday for my group, hopefully, will be a homecoming in Everland. Their goal right now is to travel to Everland. So let's figure out what that scenario looks like when they arrive. And finally, if we have some time, we'll do a little Q&A. Just depends upon what, how long all of this very ambitious agenda takes for us. But if you have questions, pop them in chat. I'll try to address them. Maybe I'll just kind of take them catch as catch can today as people join in. So that is what we've got on deck. Let's start with the recap of the recap. So last session, they left Triboar fresh off of their victory against the two fire giants. They were given a couple of side quests to follow up on. They're given basically 3 side quests to follow up on, 2 of which they chose to ignore. So they were told to take this Triboar badge from Darathra Shendril, the sheriff in Triboar, take that to a certain one-eyed half-orc in Everland, and he will know what to do. That's all they know about it. That's the hook that they sucked into, was, here, take this MacGuffin to the random NPC for unpromised reward. Enjoy. So that's what they did. As opposed to, here's a letter of commendation if you present this to the King and Queen in Citadel Felbar. I assure you it will not go unrewarded. Okay, well, they weren't interested. Citadel Felbar is too far away, which is fair. All right, it is a long way away. Fine. It was never explicitly spelled out what the reward would be. So 6 of one, half a dozen of another. Let's go to the closer town. And finally, they were given the opportunity to chase down Lord Zymorven's son and find out what happened to the giant slaying great axe that he used to carry. Giant slaying great axe? There's only one person in the party who cares about that. Whatever. We're not going to ask any questions about it. All right. Well, that's what happened. So they set out to go to Everland, and we did some random encounters. They encountered a nobleman who was apparently with them at the battle in the Deserin Hills or in the Subran Hills, fighting the fire giants, and his squire, who was some sort of bard, lost his life, so he handed over a broken lute to the squire. I don't know how that's going to pay off, if it will pay off. It was just sort of a nice, like, hey, we recognize that you guys are important, and I'm an important knight guy, but I think you're more important than I am. So that's really, that was the main function, or at least the immediate function of that particular random encounter, was to impress upon the party, like, a lot of people look up to you now. You've made a mark. You've made a name for yourselves doing this little strike force mission and saving a bunch of the hostages. So that's cool. They went to Yartar, and that's when I decided, well, not then, but that day I had decided, all right, what do we know about Yartar? And if you look in the book, Yartar actually plays somewhat of an important role in Chapter 11. There's a whole scenario where this fellow named Lord Dryland takes runs this gambling pleasure cruise where he fates the noblest of the noble in Yartar, and is really kind of like a big wheeler dealer. Why wait to Chapter 11 to introduce that? Guess what? I know a bunch of guys who would like to go gambling twice. So they went on a gambling cruise in Yartar with Lord Dryland, and he did his utmost to impress them. They are the newly minted heroes of the area. And there was a lot of gossip and rumor about what had happened, but they decided, they were there to clear things up, and Lord Dryland was there to kind of show off, like, look at how influential I am. I got these heroes of Triboar, the Company of Eight, which is the name that we have decided to call the party. I've got the Company of Eight to show up at this party. So, and during the course of the party, they saw Lord Zymorvan's son with his giant slaying great axe. Looked like he was a little out of his league. They got into a gambling contest with Lord Dryland, who they learned had a notorious, like, almost kind of gambling addiction. He was a notorious hothead about winning and losing and gambling. And as fate would work out, they won the Great Axe in sort of this epic showdown of gambling prowess, where it really it came down to one final roll. It was all coming down to one roll, and everybody botched it and lost all of their money. And Lord Dryland called basically a mulligan on the whole thing, so as to save face, and had everybody re-roll. And that's when they won with a natural 20. It was a great epic moment in the game. So they got the magical great axe. That was a nice payoff. They learned some things about Yartar, encountered a couple NPCs that might prove to be important later. And then they headed off the next day, and they traveled for 5 or 6 days to Calling Horns. And they stayed overnight there. During the middle of the night, they got attacked by trolls. The bard fireballed the dwarven fighter rogue in the midst of the combat. It happens. The dwarven rogue snuck into his room later that night and shaved his head. In a bit of PC on PC violence. So that was interesting. But the next morning, the proprietor of the inn where they were staying said, hey, if you help us find out why we're getting attacked by all these trolls. They seem to be coming out of the Everway moors, and we don't know why. So, if you can help us, we'll try and do something for you. And the Zentrum dwarven rogue basically bartered when my Zent people come through here, you're going to treat them right if I do this side quest for you. So that's what they agreed to do, was wander off into the swamps. So they got out into the swamps, and they got out into the swamps, and after half a day's journey or whatever, they started to make camp, and they encountered a band of roughly 18 to 20 warriors, tribal warriors, barbarians, whatever you want to call it. They're Uthgard barbarians. They're of the Griffin tribe, I believe, is what I decided. Um, and they were in the midst of performing some sort of huge shamanic ritual. So that was sort of where we left it. Like, they observed them, and I'm not sure, they were talking about maybe we should go talk to these guys, or maybe we should try and avoid these guys, or I don't know what to do with these guys. So that was left a little open-ended, right? So that's where we're going to pick up on Wednesday. I can't really just hand wave this part of the adventure. They've chosen to go on this side quest. About all I can do is decide how long of a side quest it's going to be. By the book, it says they have to spend 2 nights in the swamp. I might be able to convince them to spend 2 nights in the swamp. I'm worried about this encounter, this side quest feeling a little tedious. You wander around the swamps. A couple things happen. Finally, you see the key incident, right? So the issue that I have with where we left off is they don't have any leads to follow other than go into the swamp and find out what is happening. So, something to think about in terms of crafting this next session is, let's not make the Uthgard Barbarian encounter the combat encounter which it likely is intended to be. Let's make this encounter a way to convey information to the players. Perhaps that will come at a price. Perhaps they want the players to join in some sort of ritual that they need an outsider for, or swear some sort of allegiance, or make an offering of gold or jewelry or wild game or some such thing. Maybe they want to exchange information with them. I don't know. But that, to me, seems like the best approach for helping give this side quest dimension and purpose. Because right now it's tick, 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 wait for the clock to strike 2 nights, and then find a fire giant who's basically berating a troll and realizing, oh, the trolls don't want to be pressed into service by these fire giants. So that's definitely something to think about, is there's an opportunity. So something that I brought up a couple weeks ago is that it's not your job as the DM to craft a story. Okay? That can be counterproductive, especially when your players don't view the story or understand the story elements the same way that you do. Your job as the DM is to create opportunities and then allow the story to emerge from that blend of opportunity and player action, player motive, right? So that's my fundamental GM advice that I use to guide my own preparation now. I would encourage you to use to guide your own preparation. Now, the real difference here between crafting a story and creating opportunities is that if you create opportunities in such a way that they're very enticing or that they are interwoven, then the story that you want to tell will emerge from the proffered opportunities that the party sees before them. If they see, oh, this makes sense to follow this guy, this makes sense, or if your opportunities are interwoven where when they follow this guy, it turns out he's working for this dude and it all leads back, then you actually get the story that you want, but the players have discovered it through their own intent and motivation. And that's what players relish. Yeah, no, and then we decided to go to this abandoned castle and da-da-da-da-da, right? But they decided to go to this abandoned castle. They didn't stand on the road and go, well, there's a castle, I guess we go there, because there's nothing else around. If you offer them the choice between going to the abandoned tower that sits off to the side of the road and then hiking up the hill to the ominous cave, which looks down over the valley, and yet both of those things are tied into the same plot elements, then even though it's a false choice and it doesn't really matter which way that they go, it still meant something to them to be able to follow that choice. They don't know that it's a false choice. The only time they find that out is after the session, when you tip your hand and they go, what would have happened if we'd gone to the abandoned tower? Well, it turns out that you find these clues and that also lead you to the chapel of the undying soldier or whatever. So that's something something to consider. BSB Care asks a very salient question here, which is how do you deal with intent, opportunities, etc., within the confines of a module, or in this case, an Adventurers League session? So, first of all, there's a rule in Adventurers League that you are allowed to adjust the encounter as you see fit, right? So if you need to make it stronger, you can make it stronger. You're not like absolutely shackled to the book. Secondly, I think Adventurers League has gotten away from pumping out a ton of certs for stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that's mentioned in the book it's an uncerted item. And so when it comes to creating rewards and things like that, as long as it's somewhere in the book and I can justify putting a similar challenge to the party, then I think they are entitled to an appropriate reward. So, for instance, there was a quest to find out what's going on with these three noble brothers who keep wandering off into the woods, and then one of them comes back beat up, and then the three of them wander into the woods, and then only two of them come back, and it turns out that they're playing this like deadly duel game. Whoever survives is going to get their full inheritance, and if the party can convince them properly, they can get a cut of that treasure, right? That 10,000 gold piece inheritance that's coming. They can blackmail them or convince them, like, you know what, if we know what you're up to, you got to give us a share of this treasure. I didn't use that quest line, but I did use those three brothers as hostage bait for the fire giants and crafted an entire challenge around them penetrating this fire giant kind of encampment, right? So therefore, to my philosophy, it's okay to cut them in on a portion of that 10,000 gold piece reward that's available. So that's part of it. Is if I want to add a couple monsters because I'm running a party of 6 instead of a party of 4, I feel justified in that. If I feel like the combat as written needs a little more spice, whether that's more challenge or it needs a different terrain or whatever, I will tweak that. So I don't feel like bound and chained to the adventure word for word. Okay, that's not important. I will say my number one. So the reason I bring up all this stuff that it's non-certed type of stuff is because it's not certed, you can't trade it away, you can't get rid of it, you're stuck with that treasure, okay? And in my mind, what that does is that makes your character inextricably tied to this adventure. You can't get away from, I've got a pair of +1 hand axes because I went and chased down the Weevil in so-and-so what's-its-face, wherever it was, right? Xantharl's Keep or wherever it is. So your character is almost like, earlier when everything was certed, you could trade certs, and you go, well, he started in this adventure, he's going to play in this one. I feel like the characters, Adventurers League has really blossomed into this thing where you play a character for a season, and every once in a while when there's a D&D epic, you maybe drag your guy out. But it's much more of a self-contained campaign. So I worry less about, does this character make sense across the different games that are going on? So let me put it this way. I've given myself permission to range afield from the storyline such as it is laid out. Partly because that's my job, right? I mean, the book is a cookbook, and I'm trying to feed my players the best, present my players with the best meal I possibly can, using those ingredients, and then also the things that I feel like need to be incorporated in order to suit their tastes. So that's fine. The other thing I was going to say about it, what was the other thing I was going to say about it? I feel like these characters only live for this season. They don't have a life beyond that. So the other point I was going to make about that, though, is I think it's tremendously difficult to play this adventure as written in the time frame allowed, right, of about 24 to 26 weeks. I think there's a lot of opportunities to do a lot of different things. And so that means some sort of editing needs to come into play. And that's also my job. So not only is it my job to embellish material or remix material as I see appropriate, but it's also my job to trim out parts of the storyline that don't necessarily like play to the best. Now, this module is written in such a way that it is components. You know, you can, in chapter 2, you can go to one of 3 cities and save them from a giant assault of various types. And the circumstances and the NPCs are different, but you do not have to play all 3 of them. So it is not an A, B, C type of plot. It's a A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, you know. So it already presents you with an array of things, a menu of items to pick and choose from. So that's basically how I deal with it. Is I want to stay on to the big story beats, and I want to use as much of the written material as possible. But I will either draw from different parts of the book and plug those things in, like I did with the Noble Quest, or remix it, like I did with the Noble Quest. Well, let me back up. So I will draw from different parts and incorporate them. That's what I did. I grabbed chapter 11 and cut out some of the intrigue stuff that's supposed to be happening, but instead use it as a set the scene type of encounter, but use all that material. Okay, so I used the name of the boat, I used the name of the noble, etc., etc., etc. I pulled from someplace else, pulled that in to make that session interesting. I remixed things where I took the noble brothers and a portion of whatever rewards are attached to that side quest and made a different area out of it. Similarly, when I put together that fire giant encampment encounter, no, there wasn't a map, and no, there wasn't a thing that says use a mouth of Grolantor, and no, there wasn't a thing that said that there's 20 orcs. But those elements were present in what was supposed to happen. What was supposed to happen was the giants rally some forces and come back and assault the town again. So I'm not afraid to use what's written as a guideline and then remix it in a way that's more interesting based on how my sessions have played out and what my players respond to and where we're at in the story. So that's how I have freed myself from some of the, I don't want to say impositions, but from the idea that I need to be beholden to the book 100%. I like to be beholden to the book 60 or 75%. The one place that I think is crossing boundaries, that I don't think is legit, is if the item is not in the book and it's not an item that says you got to roll to get this item, I do not hand out treasure that does not give me leeway, right? So if in the book it says he's either got a +1 or he's either got a great sword of giant slaying, or if it's more appropriate, a great axe of giant slaying, then I feel comfortable handing out either a great sword or a great axe, tailoring it to my party as I see fit. But if it says they find a +1 longbow and that's it, I do not change that from longbow to shortbow to crossbow to whatever. Like I don't feel justified in morphing magic items. I would love to, trust me, because my party often finds items and they're like, I don't really want that. But it's Adventurers League. That's the main stricture that I 100% follow, is if it's in the book as this is what this item is, this is the treasure that pays off, then that's the treasure that pays off. All right, so I hope that this is a very good question. Um, because you are walking a fine line of we have to stay Adventurers League legal, and I don't want somebody from another, I don't mind if somebody at another table goes, "Where are you guys at?" And they're like, "Oh, we just did the gambling thing in Yartar," and they are like, "What? I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, we moved way past Yartar. We're in da 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 da, and we never did a gambling thing." Like, I don't care if their experience at that table is different. That's fine. What I don't want is I don't want a player to go from my table to somebody else's table and go, "Well, I've got a short sword of giant slaying," and they go, "Where did you get a short? There is no short sword of giant slaying." That's what I don't want to happen. So my obligation to the book is to make sure that the players can go to another table and not raise eyebrows if they so choose, if they go play someplace else. I am not beholden to telling this story 100% as written, and I don't think any DM does, right? I don't think you can't, so that's fine. I feel empowered. I feel like I have the leeway to run the sessions as I see fit and to recraft the story as I see fit. All right, so great question. I think uh, we addressed that fairly well. So, but if something's still not clear or you're struggling in something in your game, please, by all means, fire away. Now I want to talk about resources for the road. So as I said earlier, this is a very travel-heavy section of the book, and there are a lot of calls for random encounters. We're going to talk about that in a minute. There's just plain a lot of visiting different locations, right? And as we have discovered previously when we made the trip from Waterdeep up to Nightstone, or was it? It was up to Tribawar. It was from Nightstone down into Waterdeep and then up to Tribawar. You kind of can fall into this trap of here's a town, here's the inn you're going to stay at, here's who's in charge, and here's one quirky thing about this town, and it's a very kind of like sketchbook type of approach. I like to bring a little more life to the world, although that eats time, right? So you're fighting that balancing act. So the book can be thin on what sort of the book can be thin on details just because it's got to convey this huge overarching story, but it also has to act as like a travel gazetteer for a huge chunk of the Forgotten Realms, right? So I've talked about these things before. You can obviously look things up in the book. You can obviously look up things in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, right? So those are your two primary 5e resources when you're looking for more information. And it's surprising how much is in the book someplace else, right? Like discovering that whole thing about Yartar. Like I didn't need to dwell on what the weird quirky inn was in Yartar because I had this whole other encounter that was far more interesting other than a whimsical name for an inn where you're going to stay for 8 hours and where nothing is going to happen. So those two books are something that you can lean on. I've also gone back to some of previous edition source materials, right? So one of the things that I have is the 3rd edition Forgotten Realms campaign setting. So it's big, right? It's 320 pages, and it's got a really good index. So that's the nice thing about this book is that it has a terrific index. You can if I want to look up everything that has to do with the Evermoors. Page 168, 169, 172, 224, 294, 297. Great index, right? So that's a big plus for this book. Some areas like the Evermoors just don't have a lot of campaign info attached to them. I think there may be touched on. It's an area that's maybe more developed in some of the Drizzt books, but I have not read a ton of those, so doesn't help me. Also, the Drizzt books aren't indexed, right? Like, I need something quick that I can refer to. This is very high level. Okay, the index is great, but keep in mind it's still fairly thin on information about specific towns, right? Is Calling Horns in here? That's a great question. Let's take a look. That's where our party is right now. Calling Horn. Well, that's where they were. Let's see. So Calamshan, Caladuran Smoothhands. I don't know who that dude is. I could look him up on page 240. But so Calling Horns did not make the cut. Did Everland? Everland 166, 167, 170, 171, 172. So we pull this up. The Savage Frontier, Life and Society, Major Geographical Features. So it has, 4 or 5 pages on the area where we're exploring, and it has regional history, which I think is interesting. It's a nice high-level overview type of thing that you can look at and pull some information out of. I would, if you've got it, like, why not lean on it? I happen to have it on the shelf. I purchased, specifically, Volo's Guide to the North, which was also one of the source books that Chris Perkins used in order to develop Storm King's Thunder and put the traveled gazetteer portion of Chapter 3 together, right? So I've found this also is useful when it comes to looking at some of the original lore, kind of how it was thought of. Definitely it's great for finding businesses and places. Just flip this open. Uldan's Cleaver. Amador Uldan is a fat, jolly giant of a man who is always seen wearing an apron and is always, or so his wife says, covered in blood. He specializes in garlic and bird meat sausages. Dwarves love his pepper sausage. Like, that is a great thumbnail sketch of an establishment that I can pick up and do a 10-minute, 15-minute role-playing scene with. It's enough inspiration. I can run with that. So I think you can find Volo's Guide to the North and Volo's Guide to Waterdeep. Both of those books are on eBay for about $13. I would suggest investing in it, right? Just to have a little reference book when the main adventure book leaves you going, there's got to be something else here. There's precious little information about the Evermoors. The whole reason I come back around to this is the Evermoors are not particularly well detailed. I assumed it was a big swamp. Hey, let's go look at our map. So I look at this and I look, well, it's a big swamp. Well, it's moors, really. It's rolling hills, there's rocks, that sort of thing. I've described it largely as a swamp, but it's not. So that's fine. I'm gonna zoom this in a little bit so we can. Oh, it's going over my face. So here's where we're at in terms of. Why is this? I'm gonna bring this down. A little on the fly. Web magic. There we go. No, there we go. Great. So, and again, this map is in the Dropbox folder for all of Disorganized Play, right? So if you've been enjoying stuff that I've posted previously, this map is in there. And the whole reason it's in there is it has the roads and the cities that are not on the other maps except for the one that's in the book, right? So I look at the Evermoors as a giant swamp. Well, I want more information. I need to look at some other sources to help give me ideas as to what this area is like. Because all I really know is that it's moors. I don't know. Hills and swamps. And trolls. Like, that's mentioned over and over and over and over and over again. So I would say definitely, think about getting Volo's Guide if you want to run this as a serious campaign and you want help fleshing out the world. Um, obviously, Sword Coast Adventures Guide and the book itself are your main go-tos, but these are nice supplemental resources for you to help develop the encounters and what may come along as they're traveling around here during Chapter 3. And don't forget that Chapter 4 basically serves them up a big slice of fetch it quest pie and sends them back wandering around, running around, getting all this stuff, right? Now, they kind of get away with a few tricks of you can use teleportation circles to short circuit some of the journeys. You can get a flying airship to ferry you around. Maybe the magic cloud castle comes back, like whatever. There's some ways where it skips over a lot of the it's not really fair to say tediousness, but the kind of like make work nature of you're traveling for 22 days and this is a realm filled with danger and monsters, and yet nothing happens for 22 days. That means I've got to invent some things to happen, and I also want them to have meaning in the larger world. Guys, the mailman's here. I got to wrap up this stream pretty soon. So that's they do kind of cut some corners there on travel time, which is fine. By the time you get to 7th or 8th level, you should be able to cut a few corners on your travel time. But that's something to think about. Is let's lean on some resources to make this feel organic and integrated. I use those words a lot, but that's how you craft a believable story. Is you make your fantastic elements either stand out as a surprise and really hit them with the spotlight and highlight what's going on, or you make them organic and integrated and make it feel like, oh, that makes sense within the world. Yeah, oh, this is right next to a big troll moor. Yeah, well, of course those guys are, those tribesmen are hunting for the heart of a troll. I wonder what they need it for. Da 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 da. Like if we help them capture one, what is it going to be? Good for them? Bad for them? Which, by the way, I just came up with a hook right there. Like, I think that's a great hook. Like, the Uthgard barbarians are like, anybody who can help us capture a troll and cut its heart out, we will help you find information or whatever. Something to think about. So those are some resources for the road. Do yourself a favor, spend $30 on eBay or whatever, and get some inside info. Help yourself out. Not so random encounters. I've just been talking about this, right? But there's a couple ideas that I just want to explore. I talked about them a little bit on Thursday, but I want to give them their due. I want to just kind of solidify them a little bit in terms of our discussion here, right? So, two things. Number one, there's no rule that says you can't pre-roll your random encounters and know, okay, they're going to spend 5 days traveling from Calling Horns to Olathir's Hold, Olostir's? I don't remember the name. Anyway, to their next travel destination. They're going to spend 5 days doing that. Instead of sitting at the table and rolling, as I'm doing my prep, I'm going to roll and see what random encounters I get. There's also no rule that says you have to accept the results of that random encounter. We just fought trolls in the Evermorn. I can't have another troll fire giant encounter. I need to replace it with something else. I'm either going to pick off the menu or I'm going to sub in a monster from Volo's. I'm going to put in a different encounter, maybe a short role-playing encounter or something like that, right? So you got two options there. Two approaches that I would suggest you take. Number one, what I'm planning to do is figure out what random encounters are going to happen. Number two, figure out whether I like them. I'm going to use this stuff off the chart. And number three, then what the whole purpose of this, going back to what I was just saying, is I want to pre-cook on this thing and see if I can use it as a way of underlining story points that have been missed by the party, introducing new information that they maybe should have gotten someplace else or are going to get down, shortly down the road, but why not foreshadow it a little bit? So I can use it to underline, I can use it to foreshadow, I can just use it as a change of pace. We've had too many combat encounters, let's make this a light little negotiation scene where a daughter is upset with her father because she just found out that he's planning to marry her off at the next town where they're stopping. She thought they were just on a journey to go pick up some trade materials or whatever, and it turns out that he's actually arranged a marriage for her, and she's upset about it. And the players can negotiate that situation as they please. So for some ideas like that, I would encourage you to look at the DM's Guild and see if you can find some random encounter or encounter prompts that will help you come up with those ideas. But I think the key to pulling off successful random encounters is to make them feel integrated into the whole, right? To give them a reason for happening and to make them germane to the party of adventurers. Now, maybe the reason they exist is just to highlight how dangerous this area is. Okay, that's fine. There's a couple different ways you can do that without them getting into combat. You find another pile of dead bodies that has been burnt and left behind. You find 7 more skulls that are hanging from this tree. They're clearly freshly flayed and not bleached white, dried out bones. They still have bits of flesh attached to them. There's ways to do that without getting them into a fight. You can describe those things. You can also use weather, etc. So when you're putting together your list of random encounters, the other advantage to pre-rolling those encounters is you can foreshadow the encounter that's coming up. All right, day 2. It starts to drizzle. It's uncomfortable, but it's not a big deal. You make your camp for the night, everything's fine. It continues to rain overnight. In fact, it picks up the next morning and the rain starts to come down harder. Travel's starting to get unpleasant. You're cold, you're a little damp, but you're able to find some dry firewood. You make camp and everything's fine that night until about 2 a.m. when it starts raining harder and you've got 1.5 inches of water in your tent and your feet are soaked and your pack is soaked and your bedroll is soaked. And when you wake up in the morning, you're cold, clammy, you don't have a dry piece of clothing on you, and you're angry to have to get on top of that horse. And in fact, your horse is angry that it had to stand out in the rain all night. It's not any happier about going someplace than you are. And that's when the lizard men attack. So those are the sorts of things that you can do, is you can use non-encounter elements to foreshadow, oh yeah, or you find some footprints in the mud. Okay, well let's not make it a whole encounter. Well, we investigate around. Yeah, there's some stuff to find. It looks like their webbed feet and claws. Anybody want to make a nature check? Seems like maybe a lizard men passed by here recently. But the tracks are hours old. The puddles are filled in. Oh, okay. Well, then they start going on alert. Great, good. So many times we want to spring random encounters on the players like it's a surprise. And it's a random encounter table. It is not a random ambush table. And that's something you have to keep in mind. That when players see you rolling for random encounters, they're expecting you to ambush them with a group of monsters. And expecting an ambush is the opposite of an ambush. So use those opportunities if you free roll, if you pre-roll your random encounters, use those opportunities to backfill some of that time with something that maybe foreshadows, or maybe it foreshadows or underlines story elements way back down the line. You see more evidence that giants have passed this way. There's very clearly a trail of muddy footprints that are 4 feet long that have gone from one side of the swamp across the muddy road into the other side of the swamp and disappeared. Great. That's an interesting. A random encounter does not have to be an encounter per se. BSB Care asks, so an encounter doesn't necessarily have to be a battle then. I mean, I think that the way that they are set up in the book is that they are encounters with creatures. If you look in the book, it will say there are two knights, and it might say something like two knights are fighting a fire giant, or two knights have broke their wagon has broken down and they're looking for someone to help them, but they're afraid to leave the wagon because it's got valuable stuff in it, or whatever. So they aren't always necessarily combat encounters, but the vast majority of them are presented as combat encounters. And I think canonically in Dungeons and Dragons, these things are presented as, well, you're out in essentially the outdoor version of a dungeon. Some random creature could wander by and do a drive-by on you and attempts to kill you and take your stuff. Just like random adventurers drive by monsters all the time, kill them, and take their stuff. So I think the original intent was to emphasize the wilderness aspect of the world and how much peril you put yourself in just by leaving the safety of your keep. That's another thing to keep in mind, is this came out of a wargaming tradition, right? So your ultimate goal in a wargame was to establish a keep, fortify your manor, and then defend it against all number of attackers who may come to take it over. That's not the goal anymore, but those tendrils of origin, design, story, those gaming roots run deep into the game. You can't necessarily get away with it, get away from it. So James V does make a very good point that the party could come upon an encounter and have the option to ambush a monster. That's essentially what the option I gave them with the Uthgardt Barbarians, is these guys are so involved in their ritual, they're not doing a good job of being on guard, but also they don't seem worried about it. There's 20 of them. Like they want a troll to come and attack them, right? That's what I've now decided. But yeah, you could come. I mean, I think that's a very good option for a random encounter, is not that the random encounter comes across the party. That's passive. It's more interesting for the party to come across the monster. That's active on the player's part. They have choices about how they want to approach, how quiet they want to be, do they want to tie their horses to a tree, etc. And also what that does is it provides you with an opportunity to think about, okay, if there are two ogres up ahead and the party's going to encounter them, what are these ogres even doing? Oh, they caught a deer, they killed a deer, now they're arguing over who gets to eat which half, or who gets to eat the whole thing. Two ogres are fighting over a deer. Well, now I've got an idea. I know what's happening. There's yelling. There's the smell of blood. There's probably footprints and trails and da 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 da. I can paint that scene if I know what if I figure out what the circumstances are. That's far more interesting for the party. They can choose to avoid the encounter. They can take these guys out if they want to. They can capture them, whatever. But that's far more interesting than you've made camp, you hear a rustling in the brushes, and suddenly two ogres jump out. Sometimes that's what you need, right? Sometimes you just need that little, everybody's energy at the table is lagging, and they're not really sure what they're doing, and then, a combat happens, and it brings the whole table back into focus, back into life, right? So that type of encounter is fine. I'm saying that in a random encounter, do not lean 100% on that idea. Like I said, it's a random encounter table. It's not a random ambush table. And that's where using it in that way is the most obvious way to use it. So it's an easy... I don't want to call it a beginner mistake. It's just, it's honestly it's the way that I've approached it for many, many, many years. And it's one of the reasons that I skip random encounters many, many times, is because it feels cliche. It feels tired once you've worked up your gaming acumen. Oh yeah, and then in the middle of the night we got attacked by, and then you got to go through this whole rigid process of, okay, I wake up at 11:50, spend 10 minutes putting on my armor, go relieve the guy on watch. He sleeps for 4 hours. If anything happens, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We've cast an alarm spell on this part of the camp. We're not using, all of that kind of trying not to, that tedious kind of meticulous detail that you put into making sure that the DM doesn't screw you because they rolled a 92 on the random encounter table, or they rolled a 6 on a d6 for that hour, or whatever means that you use to determine that. It can become tiresome to set that up. Again, if you're anticipating an ambush all the time, then you spend the game anticipating rather than playing. So that's something to think about, and it goes back to use all of these elements of pre-rolling, determining what aspects of the adventure you want to highlight using this random encounter. And foreshadowing the actual encounter itself, maybe, with some non-encounter elements. But use all of these to make your random encounters feel integrated and organic into the storyline. Because ultimately, there's two purposes that I can think of off the top of my head to a random encounter. One, like I said, is to wake up the party. Guess what, guys? Let's have a combat. Let's get everybody rolling some dice. I firmly believe in Adventurers League that when you have a full session where you don't have a combat, there are people who are going to walk away from the table disappointed just by virtue of the fact that it's Adventurers League. They've come to roll some dice and kill some stuff. Okay, in your home game, maybe you can have just an RP session and it's fine. You get 2 or 3 of those in a row, and it's a nice change of pace to throw a combat in there. So random encounters can definitely serve that function of just some random bandits happened by and decided to jump the party and take advantage of whatever sort of perceived opportunity is laid before them. But you also have to deal with the potential that we're going to capture these bandits and find out who sent them, why they're onto us. It's more helpful to have a good answer to that than it is to go, oh, it turns out they're just random bandits, guys. Okay. Jerks. Whatever. So that's the second purpose of random encounters is to help, and it's not stated explicitly, right? Because I think most random encounter tables are put in there to, well, let's make sure that we convey that the world is dangerous, okay? But I think a smart advanced technique is to use it to underscore story elements and paint a picture of the broader world around you that seems organic and integrated to whatever is germane to the party, right? I mean, you can throw in a weird MacGuffin or a red herring every once in a while, and that's fine. But your players are going to buy in and get excited about things that they discover, and if they discover them through a random encounter, they don't know that was random. It doesn't have to feel random. So make your random encounters feel like they're not random encounters. Make them feel like, at the very least, feel like part of the greater world. Not everything is we're all taking the ring to Mordor. Okay? That's fine. It doesn't all have to be on-the-nose quest stuff. But it can be, we heard the trains have started moving around. Yeah, there's weird stuff going on. Okay, that's now integrated into the world. There's a vicious spider that guards that pass. Nobody's gone up there in years. Great. You didn't, you had an encounter with an NPC who foreshadowed something bad that was going to happen a few days later, or a week later, a month later, whatever. So, BSB Care asks, as an aside, do you just randomly roll dice to mess with players' heads? I have, honestly, like more often than not, there's two things. There is, I've decided something's going to happen. I will randomly roll dice to make it seem like it was more random. I don't do that a ton anymore. Uh, but it does come up. Like if you're gonna make your random encounters feel like the random encounters, you have to roll some dice, even though, as I just discussed, you preordained that this is gonna happen on day 5. Okay. So you don't, like, I would still keep up the appearance of rolling dice. To Here's why that's important, because it seems like a bit of dishonest misdirection, and that's not the intent. Okay? The intent is not to hoodwink the players into thinking that this is a random encounter. Okay? The intent behind this is players are aware of on a meta level, of the idea of random encounters. And therefore, when you're rolling dice, if you're not rolling them in the open, the fact that you're rolling dice behind the screen and checking some result or not lends drama and suspense to that series of dice rolls. Okay, so it's just a moment. It's a very meta thing, but it's a moment within the play experience where, if deployed properly, you can build suspense with, okay, the first day goes by, nothing happens. Roll a couple more times. On the third day, then you roll 6 times, and they're like, oh man, we're really in the thick of it, right? So it's a way of introducing rhythm into your game that can otherwise be missing, right? So let me turn off my phone here. So it's a way to create in a meta way. So in a book, you might describe how, as they follow the road, the conditions of the road degrade until it's really no more than a deer path that's surrounded by these dark, foreboding trees, and the weather turns, and da 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 da, right? And if you have the time to paint that kind of picture, great. Like, please, by all means, use those types of literary mechanisms of foreshadowing, and kind of scene painting to set the tone for what's happening in the world. But you can also do something that an author cannot do, which is, dice have meaning in the game. They're your totem of power. They literally decide your fate. And so rolling them with intent and rolling them so that it feels like there are consequences to what might happen can help build that sort of suspense and build some drama and make them feel like, even if nothing happened, like, oh, he rolled a bunch of times. I guess, well, we got lucky getting through there. I don't know that we want to go back that way if we have to turn around. And that doesn't mean that you should use it dishonestly, but you can. It's certainly an area where it's very acceptable. If you're rolling behind the screen, it's very acceptable to fudge that piece of it. It's just random encounters. It's not germane to the story, otherwise it wouldn't be a random encounter. So you can play that as a rhythm and pacing device, or a drama and stakes device in your game. You just have to make sure that your players do not let on to that's what's happening, or you've sucked all of the drama out of it. Like it's a game that's predicated on players' assumptions about what's happening, and if they assume that the outcome is foreordained, it doesn't have the effect that you're going to be looking for. So it is 4 o'clock. I just want to briefly touch on Homecoming and Everland. We've done our Q&A kind of as we've gone along the whole time, so I'm not gonna come back around to that. If you have a final question or two, obviously we started a little later and we have some different people in the chat because of that, which is great. But the point being here that I want to talk briefly about Homecoming in Everland, because ideally what happens is in the next session, they explore the Everway Moors. They find out that the fire giants are recruiting trolls or whatever, and therefore a bunch of cowardly trolls are being driven out of the moors and are bleeding into more civilized areas where they wouldn't normally roam. So hopefully they'll take care of that at least by the halfway point of tomorrow night's session. Then what I'd like to do is maybe have a random encounter or two, depending upon how my prep goes, and move on to Everland. So they're supposed to go to Everland, give this platinum badge to a half-orc, and in Everland they meet up with a mage who is the head of the Harpers for that area, and he grants them access to the teleportation circles that the Harpers have located around the Sword Coast. And so that's their travel shortcut, right? So that is really one of the mandatory events that needs to be included in Chapter 3 before you move on to Chapter 4. And the other mandatory events are, in my mind, not as important. The hill giant, we talked about this last time, so the meeting the hill giantess at the old tower, I don't know that is that's something that I'm going to include. And the third thing is meeting Harshnag, and that's kind of baked into the scenario, right? Or that's baked into the next part of the scenario. Potentially they've already met Harshnag, right? So that's what I need to focus on. Is I think they're going to get to Everland, and I need to have an idea of what that scene is. I think tentatively, as we talked about it last week, the scene is they get access to the teleportation circles, but the wizard goes, "Look, guys, we know that you're all Zents. Like, we're Harpers. Like, we can figure it out. We're not stupid. Normally, we wouldn't have anything to do with you guys. You guys pull some dirty, dirty garbage. But something larger is at play here. You guys have observed much of it firsthand. We propose a truce. We propose that we work together. We are willing to grant you access to our network as long as I approve. And you, in exchange, will share all your findings with us. Obviously, you're going to share it with your Zentarum bosses. That's fine. In this particular instance, we believe the threat to the land is greater than any sort of disagreements of philosophy that we may have between our two factions. I like that idea. I think it's going to work great. And I talked about it last week. Why is this important? It underlines the idea that they are all quote-unquote Zentarum, right? So it's kind of like a good way for the Harpers to cement the idea that they're Harper agents. Their moles are actually legitimate Zents. So that's one thing. On a greater level, it clears out a potentially boring story element. Okay? And what I mean by that is the question of when are the players going to get found out for being Zents? Or when are the players going to get found out for being Harpers? Those questions are boring because the players at the table, on a meta level, already know what's happening. So playing it out through role-playing is a little bit of a nod and a wink type of situation, which is not particularly satisfactory, right? It's far more enjoyable for you 12 sessions in to turn to your buddy and go, I bet you didn't know I was actually a Harper. And he actually did not know that you were a Harper. It is not satisfying to go 12 sessions in and go, by the way, I'm a Harper. Your character has figured it out. So my character is telling your character that my character is a Harper, just like you have known since we created our characters 3 months ago. So In acting class, my acting teacher said when you come across a piece of text and there's a situation, say, where it's ambivalent, you're not given the information about whether somebody knows something, right? So let's say that there is a husband and wife, and they're in the car, riding in the car together, and she says, you know, where were you this afternoon? And he says, oh, I had to take some sick time because I got food poisoning from lunch. And it turns out that later in the scene, he reveals that he was having an affair, right? If the question in the text, if it's ambiguous as to whether the wife knows when she says, where were you this afternoon? If it's ambiguous whether she knows about the affair, your best and strongest and most interesting position to take is that the character always knows. Assume that she knows what's going on. Unless it's explicitly ruled out in the text, assume that your NPCs know things because it's a great shortcut to getting to the heart of conflict or intrigue or role playing. You don't have to play out information that the entire audience, in this case, all of the players, know about. So it's far more interesting for the head mage of the Harpers to go, we know that you're all Zentrum. We're still willing to cut you a deal. Okay, now his motivations come into view. Is he playing a double layer game because 3 of these guys are Harpers? It raises so many more interesting questions than, well, if Darathra sent you, then you must be trustworthy folks. That strains credulity, and it does not make for an interesting role-playing scene. So that's one of the things that I really wanted to touch on in this Homecoming in Everland. Like, obviously that needs to, like, happen in some way, shape, or form. Like, that scene, I would like that scene to take place tomorrow night so that we can kind of tie it off in a bow or whatever. But I just want to impress upon you that piece of advice, that the character always knows. It's far more interesting to get to the heart of what's happening and then deal with the complications as they unfold than it is to tap dance around when do they find out and let's make some knowledge checks and, oh, I'm going to make some deception checks and da-da-da-da. It's a world of fantasy, magical scrying, sending spells, etc. Word can travel fast. There can be a reason for that guy to know. So that's kind of that's what I got for today. That's what I really wanted to cover. That's the highlights, and we're 10 minutes over. I don't like these things. I know we started a little, we rescheduled ourselves for a little bit later, but I want you to go home and digest some of this stuff. So that is our prep. If you have any other questions, kind of throw them at me on chat, but I think I'll probably pick them up on Thursday is what it's looking like. Let's take a look at what's going on the rest of the week. So tonight, Rhodes Legacy is happening. So Tyler Rhodes and his son Henry will be playing some delicious video games at 7:30 tonight. Always chaos at hand. Tomorrow night, the Lost Brigade returns. So that's exciting. That will be our Dungeons & Dragons 5e game with GM Mace McDaniel back in play. I'm back on Thursday for the final Disorganized play of 2016. Hopefully I will have something interesting to report about how the session went. One of the things that's missing in my prep here is I am aware that this is going to be the last game of the year, and so we're going to have a break of about 3 weeks from me DMing. 2 weeks for sure. I would like to have some sort of capstone just because it's the end of the year. Make a special occasion out of it. So I need to noodle on that. I recommend you guys do the same if you're going to have any kind of like year-end, you know, kind of final session before you guys all go off on break or whatever. Think about ways that you can make that session extra special. So I don't know that I will cliffhanger them. If anything, the only cliffhanger that I can see coming would be for Jorgen to either appear or send word, I'm in Citadel, I'm on my way to Citadel Felbar, or I'm in Citadel Felbar. I found the guy who stole my axe. I need your help. That would be an awesome. It's not really a cliffhanger, right? Not in the traditional sense, but it would be an awesome way to prime the pump for them to go, oh yeah, we're teaming up with Jorgen. We're gonna go kill somebody. That would be a great topper to this arc and get them jazzed for the end of the year, but more importantly, get them jazzed to come back at the beginning of the year. So I think if I can't have some sort of capstone combat experience or combat scene, because I think combat may get involved in my random encounters in the Troll, in the Everway Moors. That's probably going to be some sort of fight. I'd like to avoid having another fight later. I think that would be a very dramatic way to pay off. All right, guys, bam, we're putting a stamp on 2016 and postage due 2017. So think about that. The rest of the week here, speaking of the rest of the week, Friday nights, Call of Cthulhu Black Bag. This is, I believe, the last one of 2016 for that too. Tune in. I think that might be actually tying off the storyline for this particular season of Call of Cthulhu. So tune in Friday night with Mr. Wes Otis. Saturday, Masks with Stephen Pope. 5 o'clock is Phoenix Dawn Command. You don't want to miss those. I keep recommending them over and over every week, so please tune into that. Sunday at 2 o'clock, Mr. Iron Tusk is coming in for Maximum Miniatures. If you have seen any of the gorgeous, gorgeous minis that we have featured in Lost Brigade or back in Barkeys or anything like that, or I've often used, and not often enough to be honest, in Monday Night Dungeon Fights, Iron Tusk is just a terrific artist. Goes to the level of detail, asks you okay, well, what if your character had a theme song, what would it be? Because I want to listen to it while it ends on while I'm painting. I started reading the chat. My mind wandered. If your character had a theme song, I want to listen to it while I'm painting this miniature, so that I can make sure I get the feeling right of what your character is like, and what color scheme clothes are they wearing? Do they have anything? Piece of unusual equipment? Do I need to hack them any or whatever? So definitely tune in Sunday at 2 o'clock and watch some Maximum Miniatures. Get some tips on painting. Maybe it's time to break out some of those Reaper bones and do some painting yourself. I know it's the last hurrah before a busy holiday season here, but it's not a show that we run often, so I encourage you to tune in. Yes, as BSB here points out, Black Bag ends the season on Friday, and then they come back with a whole new party on 1/13. So that is our lineup for the week. We got, I think, some really good stuff for you queued up here. I will be back Thursday to tell you how it all went wrong. So until next time, I'm Tom Lommel. You can always at me at Dungeon Bastard if you have a question, if you have an issue, or you just want to share how great your game was. I am glad to hear it there. Until next time, let's dungeon. Yeah, 3 for 3.